My stepdaughter falsely accused me of inappropriate conduct because I denied her $7,000, but I had installed hidden cameras and recorded her confession. Now she faces a defamation lawsuit and lost all her friends. When the truth came out, I'm 46 years old. I work as a construction project manager, and I need to tell this story because what happened recently literally destroyed my second marriage and almost completely ruined my reputation. The thing is, I thought I was doing the right thing, you know, giving love a second chance after my first marriage. But it turns out that sometimes people see your kindness as weakness. And that's exactly what happened with Hannah, my ex-wife Patricia's daughter. I guess I should start from the beginning, so this makes sense. Because looking back, I should have seen the red flags way earlier. But when you're in love and you want to believe the best in people, it's amazing the things your brain justifies as normal. I met Patricia about 4 years ago at a local art gallery. One of those things you go to because a friend drags you along and you end up having a good time. She was an art teacher, 43 years old, and she seemed like a genuinely sweet person. My first marriage to Deborah had ended years before, but in a good way. I mean, there was no drama or anything. We just realized we wanted different things in life and left it at that. Deborah and I remained friends, which I know sounds weird, but it's true, and that's going to be important later in this story. Patricia had been alone since Hannah's dad, Gregory, basically disappeared when the girl was like 2 years old. He went to Texas and never showed signs of life again beyond sporadic child support checks that arrived whenever he felt like it. So Patricia had raised Hannah alone all that time, working as a teacher and doing what she could. And I respected that. I really did. We got married after dating for 2 years, and when I say everything seemed perfect at first, I mean it. Patricia moved into my house. I have a 3-bedroom house in a pretty quiet suburban neighborhood, nothing fancy but comfortable. I had bought it on my own years before. Hannah was 16 when they moved in. She was a sophomore in high school, and I thought, well, only 2 years until she goes to college, how hard can it be? Spoiler alert, it was way harder than I ever imagined, but not in the way you'd think. The first few months were weird but normal. I mean, Hannah was kind of cold to me, but I understood it. Like she's a teenager, and I just arrived in her life. I didn't expect her to welcome me with open arms. What I didn't expect was the attitude of absolute superiority. She started showing literally 2 months after moving in. It started with her room. Hannah decided her bedroom needed a complete makeover because, according to her, it was too childish. Patricia asked me if we could give her money to redecorate, and I said, sure, within reason. Well, it turns out Hannah's idea of reasonable included designer furniture that cost more than what I make in a month. We're talking about a bed that cost $3,000, a chair that was like modern art or something for $800, and when I told her that was out of budget, she threw a tantrum that lasted 3 full days. Literally didn't talk to me. Told her mom I was cheap and that her friend Melissa had better stuff than her. And Patricia ended up convincing me to spend more than I wanted because she felt guilty about all the years Hannah had lived without a father. That was the first time I gave in. And believe me, Hannah learned quickly that if she pushed hard enough through her mom, I would eventually cave. After the room came the Paris trip. Hannah was a senior in high school at that point. She was like 17, and all her friends were going on a graduation trip to Paris with their families. Hannah came home one day and announced that she also wanted to go, that we would pay for the entire trip because all her friends were going and she couldn't be the only one who stayed behind. Patricia looked at me with those eyes I already knew. Those please say yes, because if not, I'm a bad mother eyes. And I tried to explain that a trip to Paris for a teenager with her friends was going to easily cost $4,000 or more, and that wasn't something we could afford just like that. Hannah exploded, said I had money for my things but not for her, which wasn't true at all. I lived modestly and saved most of my salary. In the end, we didn't go to Paris. But Hannah didn't speak to me for weeks and told everyone at school that her stepfather was a miser who didn't love her. Then came the car accident. Hannah had just gotten her driver's license, and Patricia lent her her car one Saturday so she could go to the mall with her friends. It turns out Hannah crashed the car into a pole in the parking lot because she was texting while driving. The car was left with a significant dent in the front bumper, and when she came home crying, I expected her to at least admit her mistake. But no. Hannah said it wasn't her fault because the parking lot was poorly designed, and that besides, the pole shouldn't be there. Patricia consoled her and asked me if we could help pay for the repair because her insurance would go up a lot if they reported it. I paid the $1,200 for the repair because Patricia begged me, saying Hannah had learned her lesson and it wouldn't happen again. But things kept escalating, you know what I mean? Every time I thought we had reached the limit of ridiculous, Hannah found a new way to surprise me. When she was 18 and in her first year at the local community college, she came home one day with a dog, a German Shepherd puppy, that according to her she had adopted because she felt lonely and needed company. She didn't even ask. She just showed up with the dog and announced we now had a new pet. I explained to her that I'm allergic to dogs, not severely, but enough to make it uncomfortable to live with one, and that, besides, I pay for the house and should have a voice in decisions like this. Hannah cried for hours, told Patricia I hated animals and was cruel. And although Patricia tried to reason with her, in the end, the dog stayed because Hannah threatened to leave the house if she had to return it. So, there I was, taking antihistamines every day and cleaning dog hair from my furniture because an 8-year-old girl didn't know how to accept no for an answer. The next drama was the modeling portfolio. Hannah decided she wanted to be a model, which, well, everyone has their dreams, but for that she needed professional photos that cost $2,500. I suggested she get a part-time job and save to pay for them herself. You know, like normal people do. But Hannah acted like I'd asked her to sell a kidney. She told me her friends didn't have to work because their parents supported them, and that I clearly didn't see her as a real daughter because if I did, I would pay for the photos without thinking. Patricia mediated the situation, and we ended up paying half. But Hannah didn't even say thanks. She just took the money and moved on with her life like it was her right. All this had me frustrated. That's obvious, but I really tried to keep the peace for Patricia. My wife was a good person. She really was. But she had this massive blind spot when it came to Hannah. Every time I tried to talk about her daughter's behavior, Patricia got defensive and said Hannah had had a difficult life without a father, that she felt guilty for not having given her more when she was little, and that now that we had the resources, we should help her. I tried to explain that giving Hannah everything wasn't helping her. It was making her more manipulative and entitled, but Patricia didn't want to hear it. Deborah, my ex-wife, warned me too. One day we were having coffee, which Patricia knew about and was fine with because, like I said, Deborah and I were friends, and Deborah told me, Ray, that girl is using you like an ATM and her mom is letting her. Be careful because this isn't going to end well. But I ignored the warning because I wanted to believe that eventually Hannah would mature and things would get better. Then we get to the event that basically triggered the whole disaster. Hannah was 19 at that point. She had left community college after a year because, according to her, it wasn't for her. And she was living in my house, not doing much more than going out with her friends and posting photos on Instagram. One day she approached me with this elaborate presentation on her laptop and said she needed to talk to me about a business opportunity. I sat down thinking maybe she was finally showing some initiative, and she explained that she wanted to start a skincare business selling handmade organic products. Up to that point, everything sounded good. But then she told me the amount she needed to start. $7,000. $7,000 for initial inventory, packaging materials, a professional website, and social media marketing. I asked her basic questions, like, have you researched your competitors? Do you have an actual business plan? Have you calculated how long it will take you to recoup the investment? Hannah, I had no answers for any of that. She told me all she needed to know was that her friends would buy the products and that she had like 5,000 followers on Instagram, so marketing would be easy. I explained that $7,000 was a lot of money to invest in something without a solid plan, and that if she really wanted to do this, she should start smaller, maybe get a job to save the startup capital herself, and do proper market research. Hannah got angry immediately. She told me I never believed in her, that I always found excuses not to support her, and that if I really saw her as my daughter, I would give her the money without asking so many questions. I told her no. That this time, she needed to prove to herself she could do something on her own before I invested that amount of money. What happened next? I honestly never saw coming. A week after our conversation about the business, Patricia came home from work early and looked devastated. I asked her what was wrong, and she told me we needed to talk. That Hannah had told her something very serious about me. My stomach sank, because from the tone of her voice I knew it was bad. Very bad. Patricia sat on the couch, and with tears in her eyes, told me that Hannah had confessed to her that I had tried to touch her inappropriately several times, that I entered her room when she was changing, that I had made comments about her body, and that basically I had behaved like a predator. I froze, literally couldn't even process what I was hearing. I told Patricia that was completely false, that Hannah was lying, probably because she was angry about the money thing, but Patricia said why would her daughter lie about something so serious? I tried to stay calm and explain to Patricia that I had never ever done anything remotely inappropriate with Hannah. That, in fact, I barely even interacted with her beyond basic conversations, because she had always been cold to me. I reminded her that I worked all day, and when I was home, I was generally in my office or in the living room, not lurking near Hannah's room. Patricia wanted to believe me. I could see it in her eyes, but she was also torn because it was her daughter making the accusations. She asked me directly if there was any possibility that Hannah had misinterpreted something, if maybe I had said something she took the wrong way, and I swore to her that no. This was a complete fabrication. The next few weeks were an absolute nightmare. Patricia insisted that she and Hannah stay at Patricia's mother's house while they processed all this, and I was left alone in my own house feeling like a criminal, despite being completely innocent. Patricia asked me for space to think, but every time I tried to talk to her to resolve the situation, she told me she needed more time. Meanwhile, Hannah had started telling some of her friends her version of events, and I could feel my reputation being destroyed based on lies. The worst part was the helplessness, you know? I couldn't just go around shouting that I was innocent because that would make me look more guilty. But I also couldn't stay silent and let these accusations define me. It was at that point I made the decision to hire a lawyer. I called a firm that specializes in defamation and false accusation cases, and the lawyer, a guy named Marcus, told me we needed solid evidence to prove Hannah was lying. He explained that my word against hers wouldn't be enough, especially in the current climate where people tend to believe accusers by default. Marcus suggested I start documenting everything systematically, that I collect any evidence that could demonstrate my innocence, and above all, that I have no direct contact with Hannah because she could use that against me. So that's exactly what I did. First, I reviewed all the security cameras in my house. I had installed cameras at the entrance, in the living room, and in the backyard, like 3 years ago after there were some burglaries in the neighborhood. And those cameras saved recordings to the cloud. I spent days reviewing footage, especially from the times when Hannah alleged I had entered her room or made comments. The cameras clearly showed my daily routine. I left the house at 7 inches the morning, returned at 6 inches the evening, and generally stayed in my office or watching TV in the living room. There was no evidence of me lurking near Hannah's room or behaving suspiciously. Then I reviewed the text messages between Hannah and me. It turns out there were very few, because she almost never wrote to me unless she needed something, and when she did, my responses were always appropriate and brief. I saved screenshots of all those conversations. I also talked to my neighbors, specifically Mrs. Jenkins, who lives next door and who is home all day because she's retired. I explained the situation to her without giving too many details. Just told her there had been false accusations and I needed to know if she had seen anything unusual. Mrs. Jenkins told me she had never noticed anything strange. That in fact, she thought Hannah was the one acting weird because she saw the girl coming and going from the house at all hours with different people, but that I always seemed very professional and reserved. Marcus suggested something else to me. Something that made me uncomfortable at first, but that I eventually agreed to do. He told me to install voice-activated recorders in the common areas of my house because Patricia and Hannah would eventually come back to pick up more things, and that if I could capture Hannah saying something incriminating, that would be golden evidence. I installed the recorders in the living room, in the kitchen, and in the hallway, places where I wasn't violating any law because they're shared spaces in my own house. And then I waited. 2 weeks after installing the recorders, Patricia called me and said she and Hannah would come the next day to pick up more clothes and some of Hannah's things. I told them I would be at work and they could come whenever they wanted, that I would leave the door open. But what I did was take the day off and stay at Deborah's house, who was aware of the whole situation and had offered me her support. From there, I monitored the recorders in real time through an app on my phone, hoping maybe they would capture something useful. And boy, did they capture something. Patricia and Hannah arrived around 2 inches the afternoon, and for a while I just heard them going up and down stairs, packing things. But then they stayed in the living room and started talking. Patricia asked Hannah if she was absolutely sure of her accusations because the whole situation was tearing her apart, and Hannah, with this casual voice that made my blood boil when I heard it later, said of course she was sure, that she knew perfectly well what she was doing. Patricia asked what she meant by that, and Hannah laughed, literally laughed, and said she was obviously exaggerating some things, because Raymond needed to learn that she wasn't someone he could mess with, that if he was going to deny her money for her business, then she was going to make his life difficult. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Hannah literally admitted she had lied, and Patricia, instead of getting furious, just asked if Hannah understood how serious this was. And Hannah responded that yes, but it didn't matter, because Raymond would end up giving her the money if he wanted her to retract the accusations, that she had done research and knew cases like this could ruin reputations even if they weren't true. She said. Her friends, Melissa and Jordan, thought it was cool that she was manipulating the situation to her advantage, that they had all joked about how rich stepfathers were easy to control if you knew which buttons to push. I had the entire conversation recorded. Every word. Marcus told me this was exactly what we needed. But he warned me not to rush, that we needed to build an absolutely solid case before confronting Hannah and Patricia. So I kept collecting evidence. I reviewed Hannah's Instagram and found posts where she literally bragged about her lifestyle, photos at expensive restaurants with tags like, "When your stepdad finally understands you deserve the best," photos of the dog with captions like, "Got what I wanted as always." I took screenshots of everything. I also captured another conversation a week later when Hannah came to the house alone, supposedly to pick up some things she had forgotten. This time she brought her friend Melissa, and they didn't know the recorders were still active. I heard them in the living room talking about the situation, and Melissa asked Hannah if she didn't feel bad about lying about something so serious. Hannah said no because Raymond deserved it for being cheap, and that besides she was sure he would end up paying her to shut up because nobody wants to be accused of something like that, even if it's false. Melissa laughed and said Hannah was very smart. And Hannah responded that she had always known how to manipulate her mom and that Raymond was no different. But here comes the part that left me absolutely stunned. Hannah told Melissa that her real plan was to ask Raymond for $50,000 to start her skincare business and also have some extra money to travel, and that if he didn't pay, she would go to the police with her accusations. Melissa asked if that wasn't illegal, like extortion or something, and Hannah said she didn't care because Raymond could never prove she was lying since there were no witnesses to anything. What Hannah didn't know was that every word of this conversation was being recorded in high definition. I took all these recordings to Marcus, along with the security footage, text messages, neighbor statements, and Instagram screenshots. Marcus told me we had a solid case, not only to prove my innocence, but also to potentially press charges against Hannah for defamation and extortion. But before going the legal route, Marcus suggested I confront Hannah and Patricia with all the evidence present and give them the opportunity to rectify the situation without involving the police. He told me to record this confrontation too, just to have everything documented. I organized a meeting at my house with Patricia and Hannah, telling them we needed to resolve this situation once and for all. Patricia came expecting maybe I would finally admit something or propose some kind of settlement, but instead, when they sat down in my living room, I put my laptop on the coffee table and pressed play. First, I showed them the security footage of my daily routine, demonstrating I had never been near Hannah's room at the time she alleged. Patricia frowned, but Hannah still acted like that didn't prove anything. Then I played the first audio recording, the conversation where Hannah admitted to exaggerating and where she talked about manipulating the situation. Patricia's face went pale. Hannah, I tried to say I had edited the audio or something, but then I played the second recording, the conversation with Melissa where Hannah talked about extorting me for $50,000. Patricia stood up and yelled at Hannah, asking how she could have done something like that, how she could have lied to her about something so serious. Hannah tried to defend herself, saying I had provoked her by denying her the money, that I had never treated her like real family. But Patricia was crying and yelling that didn't justify destroying someone's life with false accusations. I told Patricia I had wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, that I had wanted to believe she didn't know the extent Hannah was willing to go, but now she had heard everything and had to make a decision. I also showed her all the Instagram messages, all the posts where Hannah bragged and explained that Marcus had recommended pressing charges, but I was willing not to if they both left my house immediately and Hannah publicly retracted her accusations. Patricia was devastated, absolutely destroyed. I told Hannah she wasn't a girl. She was a young adult who had made the conscious decision to lie and manipulate, and that I had all the evidence I needed to destroy her credibility if she didn't make things right. Patricia begged me not to go to the police, that she would take care of Hannah, that she understood the marriage was over, but please don't ruin her daughter's life. I told her the marriage was definitely over, that I had already contacted a divorce lawyer, and that they had 1 week to completely leave my house. As for not ruining Hannah's life, I told her that depended entirely on whether Hannah cooperated or not. Hannah and Patricia left that night, and the next day I received a text message from Hannah saying she wasn't going to retract anything because that would make her look bad in front of her friends. That was all I needed. I called Marcus and told him to proceed with everything. We changed the locks on my house, started divorce proceedings, and filed a civil lawsuit against Hannah for defamation. We also sent copies of all the recordings to Hannah's friends who had been mentioned in the conversations, specifically Melissa and Jordan, along with letters from our lawyer telling them that if they continued spreading the false accusations, they would also be included in the lawsuit. What happened next was almost comical in its predictability. Hannah tried to spin the story on social media, posted a long Instagram post about how she was the real victim, how I had manipulated her and her mother, and even created a GoFundMe asking for donations to help with legal expenses, because supposedly I was suing her unjustly. But several of her former friends, including Melissa, who apparently had an attack of conscience after receiving the lawyer's letter, commented on the post exposing the truth. Melissa literally wrote that Hannah had admitted to her she was lying and had planned to extort me, and other friends of Hannah who had been upset with her behavior for years took the opportunity to share their own stories of how Hannah had manipulated or used them. The GoFundMe was reported and removed for violating the terms of service, and the Instagram post became an absolute disaster of people calling Hannah a liar and manipulator. Patricia called me begging me to stop everything, that Hannah had learned her lesson, but I told her it was too late, that Hannah had had multiple opportunities to do the right thing and had chosen to double down on her lies. The divorce was finalized 3 months later, without drama, because Patricia knew she had no claim to my house or my finances, and honestly, I think she just wanted it all to be over. Since then, about 8 months have passed. I think, maybe 9. My reputation was a bit damaged locally because some rumors spread before the truth came out completely, but most people who know me know I'm innocent. I left my position on the board of a local charity organization because some members still looked at me with suspicion, which hurt because I had worked with that organization for 5 years, but I decided it wasn't worth fighting to be in a place where I wasn't fully welcome. The civil lawsuit against Hannah is still in process. Marcus says, we'll probably win, but collecting the money will be difficult because Hannah has no assets or stable employment, so it's more about the principle than recovering money. I've heard through mutual acquaintances that Hannah has basically become a social pariah, that she lost most of her friendships after everything came to light, and that she's now living with Patricia's mom in a small apartment. Patricia is supposedly in therapy, trying to process everything, and part of me feels sorry for her because she genuinely didn't know the extent Hannah was capable of manipulating, but another part of me is still angry, because if Patricia had set clear boundaries from the beginning, instead of giving in to every one of Hannah's demands, maybe none of this would have happened. Gregory, Hannah's biological father, supposedly found out about everything and called Patricia offering to help, which is ironic considering he disappeared for 17 years. But I don't know what came of that conversation. As for me, I'm slowly rebuilding my life. Deborah has been incredibly supportive throughout this process, which validated my decision to keep her in my life after our divorce because she truly is a good person. I've started dating again, just casual dates for now because I'm not ready for anything serious, and I'm focusing on my work and myself. I hired a therapist too, because even though I know I'm innocent, being falsely accused of something so horrible leaves psychological scars, and I've been working through the rage and sense of betrayal. All this caused me. The biggest. A lesson I got from all this, I guess, is that kindness without boundaries isn't a virtue. It's a weakness that people like Hannah exploit without remorse. I thought I was being a good stepfather by providing for Hannah, by giving her a stable home, but what I was really doing was enabling her to become an increasingly manipulative and entitled person. And Patricia, with all her good intentions, was complicit in that by never forcing Hannah to face real consequences for her behavior. I don't know where Hannah will end up in life, if she'll learn anything from all this, or if she'll continue being the same manipulative person who tried to destroy my life because I wouldn't give her $7,000. What I do know is that I came out of this with my integrity intact, with clear evidence of my innocence, and with the determination to never again allow anyone to make me a victim of their manipulative games.